identity at the center.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Oh, not so bad yourself?
Doing great, man. I'm really excited for this episode today. Been talking with our guest. This is going to be an epic episode, right? We're talking to Rob from SailPoint, and everybody knows about SailPoint, but he's going to tell us a little bit more that most people don't know. And I just think this is an episode everybody needs to stick around to the end. And I'll kind of preview the lighter note is also going to be super interesting. So don't miss it.
Yeah. So we've got a sponsored episode today. We're happy to have SailPoint as a sponsor. Finally, I will say, and a white whale for us for a while. So shout out to Nori for helping us out with that. When people are listening to this, we will be in the throes of Identiverse. And so, I'm sure there'll be a lot of things going on, but, people will get a lot of this one. We do have Rob with us today. So let me go ahead and introduce Rob. I probably should ask how I pronounce your last name. Is it Sebaugh? Is that correct, Rob?
You got it. You got it, Sebaugh.
So Rob,
yeah.
Rob Sebaugh, senior strategist, and he also leads that team with SailPoint. So officially, welcome to the show, Rob.
Thank you. Appreciate you guys having me. It's fantastic.
Yeah. So before we get into sort of everything about SailPoint and what we want to talk about today, I do like to kind of understand, roles and people in the space. We have kind of a traditional question where we ask, how you got into identity and it chose you, or did you choose it? So, but why don't we start with that role of an identity strategist, because it sounds cool. What is it about that role that you think is something that people should be aware of? And then follow-up question is, tell us a little about SailPoint, things that people may not know about SailPoint.
Cool. Yeah. So look, the strategist role here, and I think it's, it's more of a, market term, that kind of thing. My background, and just for the audience, I joined SailPoint about 4 years ago, but I joined from being a former customer. I always tell people I'm a former customer turned dark side, right? So I've gone to the vendor, but I'm really here to help with some of the translation of things, right? I mean, we all know this is a complicated industry. There's no easy button. There's no one software that does everything, right? And so the reason my job's super cool is I get an opportunity to see hundreds of clients across the US and globally, actually. And it's an opportunity to impart a lot of knowledge, having come from industry, run a very large identity program. And to answer your earlier question, I will tell you, it found me. Identity found me. I did not find it. I would call it my previous role. I was with the company for 16 years, and when I started there, the very first thing I was handed was the Tivoli stack of things around identity, and it just really never stopped from there, right? So I mean, I've been part of this for over 2 decades, and so again, being a strategist, you have an opportunity to work with clients, give them an understanding of what it looks like to be successful, try to help avoid hitting some of those potholes that I'm sure some of us have hit along the way. And when you look at SailPoint, this company's been spearheading, identity security for a very long time, governance specifically, and then identity security. And we are doing a lot of really cool stuff, right? I mean, we've made that major transition into SaaS, almost 10 years ago as things have evolved. We've really embarked now on the AI train as lots of vendors have, but we're looking at it as a way to we have to think differently about what we do and how we apply things in this sort of massive scale of agentic things. And so, we're really, really working to set pace and tone on how we go about that.
So we've got somewhat similar backgrounds. I spent, 14, 15 years sort of in industry before I went to the dark side in consulting. So I'm always pleased to meet someone who has also kind of taken a similar path. What is it about, I guess I'll ask kind of a off-base question a little bit maybe, but what is something about that role that you had, in industry working, for a large organization where it's like, man, I wish more people knew about this, and is something that people can kind of take as advice right as we start off this episode?
Yeah, sure. I think we've done a great job as practitioners in this field to make it, and you guys, frankly, for even just doing this podcast and building what you have, for building awareness of why these things matter. It used to be that identity was sort of the redheaded stepchild of cybersecurity, for lack of a better way to put it. We're the only my opinion, we're the only application in security where everything else tends to be a tool, right? And I don't mean that negatively, but so much of cybersecurity is a 1 or a 0, right? It's on or off, it's allowed or it's denied. You can think about that way in access, but it doesn't exactly apply. Like, we have to care about end user experience. We have to care about, think about healthcare for a second. Like, I don't want to impede the ability to provide care at the clinical floor, right? I have to make sure that what we're doing is something users understand. We can't be another friction point. Where, look, in traditional cyber, like, you can say no, like that. There are reasons to have controls and things in place. And so it's in this role and an opportunity to be a strategist here. It's been really, frankly, a pleasure to come out and go, look, there's so much importance in this field. We're helping actually automate and provide business value back to the organizations that we support. We're building, user experience that allows users to work through a process and not necessarily have to be overly confused and whatever. Although it hasn't arguably always been that way. There's been a journey to get to those points, and again, like, it's an opportunity to take that experience. So in my previous role, I led a very large team, but I had purview of not just SailPoint, but our privileged access management solution, SSO solution, MFA solution, some integration technologies across those, and that's across 100,000 active identities and at least 6 production domains from acquisition. So you can underestimate sometimes how many things are going on at any given time for anyone running anything in identity. And the biggest piece of advice I offer people, especially if you happen to be in sales, is you got to understand where their heads are when you're talking to them. It doesn't matter if you're trying to sell a product or you're trying to have a conversation like this. You talk to somebody in identity, and it's if it's something they weren't expecting, like, you can catch them off guard because you're always thinking about the next step. We always have a lot of irons in the fire, if that makes sense.
Putting the strategy into I am strategist.
There you go.
From a title perspective.
There you go.
It's funny, not funny, but I agree with what you said there around, essentially context matters, right? I was having a conversation this morning with, someone we work with, Gemini. Her name is Alexis. And, the concept of context and how we explain identity to people is such a big part of it, because when I say SailPoint, for example, somebody's going to have a certain definition of it and what that does. Another person's going to have a completely separate, definition. It might be similar. It might be, 80% aligned, 50% aligned, or whatever it may be. I'm curious, from a market standpoint, I think most people know what SailPoint is and does, and they kind of assume it's a identity governance solution of some sort. Is that a fair characterization? Have we shifted into maybe more like identity security with, other things going along? But if you were in an elevator with someone today, say you had to explain like what SailPoint does, how would you explain it to them?
Yeah, look, I think governance is fair, but identity security is really the focal point, right? So, the example I always use, and I'm sure this has been told more times than once, is what's the first thing you do when you check into a hotel, right? The first thing you do is you go to the counter, you verify who you are. You hand them your ID, you hand them your credit card, you get checked in. The next thing they do is they hand you that RFID key. That key allows you to get in the building. It allows you to get to your room, maybe the gym, the lounge, right? Whatever you might have access to, but you can't just walk into any door. And at its core, that's SailPoint, right? Like, that's the idea, is that, look, we're going to govern the attributes associated to what allow you to, frankly, be destructive in an environment, right? We want to make sure that you have what you need to do your job, no more, no less. It's that standard, least privilege model. But at the end of the day, it's so much more than that when you think about the complexities of certain industries, right? You'll hear me lean on healthcare because it is near to my heart. I've spent almost 20 years in that field, although I have a lot of experience in other areas. But if you just consider the concept of an academic teaching hospital, right? So a hospital that has affiliations with universities. So think about the complexity of defining authority from an authoritative source on how you decide what an individual has access to. You could quite literally have one person in 2 to 3 different source systems. They could be an employee, a contractor, and a student all at once, right? They might research, they might volunteer. What does that look like? And how do you flip that switch as things go? So it's not just you get this or you don't. You have to consider the persona, the way you integrate, how you deliver those things. And it really matters to those individuals. Or again, we become another friction point, right? So when I think about SailPoint and really kind of just this industry in general, back to the point I made, we're enabling business. At the end of the day, that's the goal. And you do that in ways that allow people to work throughout their day without those friction points. But SailPoint on top of that is really focused on, hey, what's the next step? Where so you'll see as things are being announced that we're looking at just-in-time type access and zero standing privilege, and how do we integrate and be closer to the wire? Typically, we're not on the wire, right? That's your SSO, your MFA, other things occurring. But how do I understand that identity context and use that to allow an automation, a user, or an administrator to make a better decision?
So one of the things I talk to clients about is when you're looking at an identity and access management solution, so much of identity is business process related. And when you buy a solution, you're not only buying the technology, but to some degree, you're buying the business process that goes along with that. Is that fair? Is that good guidance that I'm giving to clients? Should I adjust that somehow?
So one of the things I know, if you've been in identity long enough, which Jeff, you have, so much of the origins of identity teams, in my opinion, are cleaning up bad business process, right? So what happens? You get a system, whether it's SailPoint or something else, you have a system, and you got to connect that system to an authoritative source. Cool. We're going to get the HR data. Well, the HR data is never clean. I know we want to believe it is. It's never clean, right? So what do the identity teams do, right? They have to work hand in hand and either get the HR team to come along for the ride, or in so many cases, and especially in legacy environments, they carry the water. They do the transforms. They do the data cleanup. They do the maintenance and whatever. And that might be fine for one or two systems. But when you're carrying that across 200, 300, 1,000 applications in an environment, trying to govern and manage it, there's a scale there that just doesn't work, right? And then you have to imagine in a monolithic disposition, like on-prem, think like Java application server type deployment. Now, like upgrades are months, if not years behind. Now the technical debt is mounting, all those types of things, right? So it's really cool, I think, that we've seen across the board, again, most all vendors in the space have really discovered that, hey, SaaS actually affords quite a few good things and scale, but it also puts guardrails out. And so no longer do we want to pick up that water and carry it all the time. We want to make sure that we provide a way to streamline those things coming in and scale up. And so to answer your question, I don't think you're wrong. I think it is you're almost buying a business process. But I also think now, given the how critical it is, we've seen all the breaches in the industry, we've seen all the things go on. We actually now have an opportunity to actually leverage why this is important and push back and say, no, let's do something better. We buy the legacy business process, but let's enhance that and make it something of more value, not just for SailPoint, but for the organization, right? The point is to increase and enhance value for the organization.
Rob, we've been using this term identity governance for 15, 20 years. And then let's face it, a lot has changed in 15, 20 years. Heck, a lot has changed in the last 6 months. And I guess what I'd like to first do, actually, because a lot of our listeners are new to the space, are learning the space, right? And we're around 15, 20 years ago in identity. What is identity governance? And then from a concept standpoint, is it even relevant anymore?
Oh, man. So look, I would ask a question back, like, why does governance even exist in the first place? Right? Why does it matter? And the answer to that, I mean, I guarantee there's earlier examples, but think Enron, think WorldCom, think the market crash of 2008. There's a bunch of other examples. When we don't govern, bad things happen, right? It's really the reality of it. Again, if you lean on healthcare and you look at HIPAA, when the ink dried on HIPAA, nothing today even states in that legislation that you have to use technology to govern anything. Like locking, file cabinets with physical files behind them is a version of securing things, right? So when I look at governance, it's really it's that check and balance of making sure that we understand who someone is, why they have the access they do. Is it relevant? How did they get it? Are they using it? It's that context around it. And I think, yeah, it's super relevant today. If you look at the amount of technical debt that I carried, so understand the organization I worked for the 16 years prior to coming to SailPoint, we were about a $1 billion organization when I joined back in the early 2000s. And when I left, they were a $140 billion organization, right? So, I mean, it's a massive, massive company. And you have to think about the crushing weight of technical debt that you incur, data center migrations. And, we went from physical servers to virtualization, all the hypervisor stuff came out, like all the things that have evolved, and now SaaS, et cetera. Governance is always the last thing that anyone thinks about. And then what happens? You get popped, you get an audit that gives you significant deficiencies, or you get ransomware, or you get, some other cyber event. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, we got to do something about it. Well, in the agentic world, if you think about, like, I don't know about you guys, but I didn't really use a Claude or a ChatGPT or an assistant, we'll call it 18 months ago. I use one regularly now. They're great. But think about the scale at which everyone's using those. Everyone's building technologies. They're dropping, things into ChatGPT or whatever it is. They're building agents in Foundry or Bedrock or, Agent Core, whatever. If we put governance last again, the scale of agentic technology is going to crush how we clean that up. Like it has to be first. It has to be first pillar. Just
I think
Rob's
one
2
of the
cents.
things with governance is that it can be throttled to be risk appropriate. Actually, right before we got on this recording, I had a meeting and someone was going through a detailed governance process for updating data for our SharePoint. And I thought to myself, if the SharePoint goes down, what happens to the company? This particular SharePoint is like nothing. It could probably go down for 2 days and nobody would say anything. That's how unimportant it is. So we don't
The SharePoint
need.
admins out there are like, no, they're crying right now, Jim.
Yeah, well, hey, depending on the SharePoint, this one in particular was like not that risky. The governance processes could be less. Take that to identity when you're talking about like privileged accounts, like that godlike accounts, or the key systems for the organization. The governance has to be a bit stronger. Would you say that's also accurate?
Absolutely. I mean, I myself, like, again, 16 years in an organization, you have any idea how much access I carried role to role? I was an infrastructure. I administered a ton of systems. At some point I received domain admin, right? That domain admin carried until I became the leader of the identity organization. And I was like, oh, hey, these things don't need to persist. You start like reasonably going, I don't actually need these things, right? And then eventually you go, wow, we really need to like zero out. We don't need 1,000 domain admin accounts. We need like 2, 4, 5, whatever the number is, but not anything massive, because that's a huge dangerous thing. So yeah, I mean, I 100% agree. It's incredibly important.
I think the thing that's happening with organizations now is like the tidal wave is now visible in terms of the non-human accounts, and that taking up a bigger and bigger proportion of the access within an organization, and understanding what is appropriate in terms of applying governance controls to those accounts, and how does that change the game. I think that's really probably one of the biggest topics I'd like to explore today, is like, how is that affecting kind of this core piece that I've always thought about with SailPoint, is the governance and really knowing, we say who has access to what. You want to call it AI a who? I don't know. Whether or not you do, how are we managing who or what gets the access when it's now, tenfold, 100-fold, whatever you want to call it, in terms of the number of accounts or number of identities, and they're not always people.
Man, there's so much to say there. So look, the last statistic I saw was something like, we're gonna break the number of humans the number of agents will outnumber the amount of humans on the planet in the next, we'll call it 3 to 5 years. that may even be a long shot at this point. It might be well sooner. And there's a few things to think about, right? So one, how many organizations do you see, work with, talk to that are still doing everything in spreadsheets, right? Excel is the number one HR system in the world. Like there's so much of it exists, and it's amazing. It's 2026, halfway through, I might add, and we're still doing these things. And so there are foundational things that really matter. And so much of that is like, yeah, it's hard. It's really difficult to wrap your arms around, millions of entitlements and what could be thousands of roles and business processes that evolve and are very dynamic. And when you do an acquisition or a divestiture, the complexities are crazy, right? Well, now you have to think about the compounding weight of, these digital agents, right, that are being created. And it's not a one size fits all. Again, Microsoft has a platform, Google, Amazon, ServiceNow has announced it, Salesforce has announced it. Like everyone is building, they're providing capabilities and their tools to agenticize those platforms. Probably the right thing to do. But from a security perspective, in most cases, we're cart before the horse, right? No one's ready. And it's a matter of, it's conversations like these that I think kind of shed light on that. And you have to also think about, you as a human, you as an individual, or even an RPA, a service account, like whatever, it's outbound access. You have specific roles and entitlements, and you have direct access to things, right? Now we have to think about what we would call inbound access. What does my access then give the agent the ability to do, or the agent's access another agent the ability to do, right? And then try to even just imagine governing that at scale in spreadsheets. Like this is a recipe for failure, no question. So to me, it's we have to get really good at this really fast. And every organization out there that's reaping the benefit from AI and agentic technology, that's fantastic. But I stand firm. Governance has got to move to the forefront. We've got to find a way. And this is frankly what SailPoint's focused on, is like, connecting into those platforms, getting that information, understanding what's there. And the last comment I would make is you also have to remember governing an agent is different than governing a human. You cannot govern an agent the way you govern a human. It doesn't fundamentally work. Agents are ephemeral. They can be. They could spin up and down at any time. And if all you're doing is snapshotting Active Directory every hour or 30 minutes, you missed it, right? And you're not getting the view from the other registries. So we have to think about it differently. It's a whole other pattern.
It's like that movie Inception. If you thought Inception was trippy, now imagine it in the identity world where you have so many different, accounts with layers, inferring access. I've heard this term being thrown about of treating identity as a treating AI as a first class identity. Have you heard that statement before?
I have. Yeah.
What does it mean to you?
I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's in my opinion, and again, I don't actually know the official definition, so I'll own that, but I have heard the phrase. I look at that as it is one of those things that's got a lot of power, and it's the old, with great power comes great responsibility. And we have to think about, we have to understand what it's doing and why. Like a great example, this was a few years ago, but Air Canada had a chat bot on their website, and I believe it was something to do with someone needed to book a flight, and there was some policy around a bereavement type flight, right? And the policy was they had to call and get this thing done first, but the chatbot said, no, you can do it after the fact. So they followed what the chatbot said, and then legally they had to sue to get things right in the country. And ultimately Air Canada lost, right? They said that agent works on behalf of your company. You are responsible for that agent. The argument doesn't fall, like that's what it is. And so I look at it as, we have to really treat these very sensitively.
Yeah, they're not service accounts that just kind of sit there and do stuff. They're more powerful and more agentic, to use that word for the first time ever, I'm sure. As part of this, ecosystem that's being built out. I'm curious from a practitioner and from a vendor standpoint, what happens when AI starts making these decisions? Because I think that's one of the questions that a lot of people are kind of struggling with right now is, at what point do we delegate and say, okay, I trust the AI. Or do we never trust the AI and we have to continually check it? Are we checking AI with other AI? Again, back to the movie Inception. Like, how do you talk to teams out there in the world of, okay, what happens when AI starts making those decisions?
Yeah. It there's so much good. It's like it's like this good and evil thing, right? I was having a conversation with a large financial institution, VP of security, and I asked the question. I said, "Hey, would you ever trust AI to do your certifications?" And he said, "And not only would we trust it, he goes, we've been building the models and we're currently deploying them to production." And I said, "Tell me more." And he said, "Look," he goes, "governance is great, right? You can follow you can do an audit as an example, and I don't know whether it's SOC 1, SOC 2, it doesn't matter, and you can check the box. Yeah, I verified this access was requested, it was approved, it looks right, whatever, right? The reality is, if all someone does is receive a certification, select all and hit approve, we've checked that box, but we've done nothing for security." And we would call that rubber stamping, by the way. And the reality is, what he was telling me, he said, the agent doesn't rubber stamp. It looks at every individual thing. And he said the fraction of a time that it gets it wrong, the friction that it creates is far less than the friction of sending out, 4,000 certification campaigns and everything else to get things done. They're just looking at it differently. And so I when I think about, what happens when what happens when the AI decides, it's again, these organizations, your organizations, right, are liable for that agent. You have to know what it's doing. And it turns out, by the way, that where service accounts often are shared or they have extra access or whatever it might be, it actually turns out that AI is good at governing AI, and there are some neat use cases for it. So, for example, you want your agent to have the tiniest possible footprint it needs to perform its function. You might even have another agent that's being a gatekeeper for those things and deciding when to elevate privilege or when to remove it or whatever it might be. And it turns out, like, having those types of functions really does enhance the ability for you to build security around what is otherwise a very terrifying concept if you don't have a model for it. So I look at it through the lens of, we're all in the game of risk. We're never going to get down to zero. But we have to know, back to Jim's point, we have to know what's critical, maybe not SharePoint, in the case that he was describing, but, certainly a, financial record database or, a health record database, things like that. Like, we want to know that we're securing the right things.
Is there, is identity governance a binary decision? So if I do trust an AI to kind of take over that role, maybe even as just a first reviewer, is it a binary decision, or is there room for improvisation or interpretation of policies and rules when it comes to, should this entity have this access or not?
I would argue there's room for interpretation. And the reason is a couple of things. One, I think one of the biggest pieces of getting agentic right is being able to have and identify and tie human to agent, right? And it's entirely possible that one individual like myself could have 10, 20, 40, 100 agents working for me, right? Almost think of them like contractors doing things. But I am responsible for them. There has to be a responsible party. And there may be good reason for things to be elevated or change or evolve depending upon what's there, or frankly stopped, shut down, the other direction of that. And so I think, you bring up policy. The other thing that's interesting in there is we are shifting, right? I think the industry is shifting away, not away, like RBAC still exists. It's going to exist for a long time, role-based access. But I think we're really looking at policy-based access in the agentic space as like the gold standard, right? You define what it does via policy and you don't let it drift. And if you need to update that policy, if that's part of the process, great. Or maybe you're introducing a new agent. So I don't think it's 1 and 0, one and done. Like, policy tends to enforce it that way. But I still think we're still, and I say we, I don't, I mean, the industry is still figuring this out, right? what it looked like 12 months ago looks drastically different today, and it's going to be different again in 12 more. So
Rob, I'm gonna throw a question at you that answering this question, have you ever seen a cat cough up a hairball? This is that kind of question, right? This is
great.
yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I have. Yeah,
So
please proceed.
my question gets what I'm getting to is, how does an organization secure the data that is in a large language model and AI model? And I remember pretty clearly, like 2 years ago, seeing a document that a vendor had published, how to secure your AI, your open AI or your chat GPT. I'm like, oh, finally, open the document. It was how to configure your single sign-on system to get you to your prompt screen. I'm like, okay, that's nothing. That's not what I'm,
Yeah.
that's not what I'm worried about. I'm worried about that I send my AI out to gather all this information, and then somebody get from the help desk or a frontline worker gets in there and starts querying with a bunch of questions. How much money does the CEO make? And just trying to find out what they can find out that they shouldn't be able to have access to. And I'm not smart enough to kind of like wrap my brain around it yet. But like, does this work on entitlements, policies, or is it something that we as IAM practitioners are responsible for? Or is it something that has to be built into the AI model that then we just put people in the right groups or roles? Like, how is that supposed to work?
Yeah. So I would argue, again, still being figured out, although leaps and bounds ahead. So if you go back even, I think it's even less than 6 months. Take Agent Core, for example, Amazon Agent Core. They had a concept for a policy engine, but that didn't exist, right? And so what you have now is you have the ability to create an agent and run it, and you can confine it with claims inside inside your token, the things that you can do to control it. But then you're basically building the security into the agent, not securing the agent with policy. And that is a recipe for disaster. And so what you see now is they've released a policy engine, and you're starting to see like Foundry's releasing one. This is where it's going, right? At the end of the day, I think the only way to scale the way that these organizations want to scale is to enforce policy on the agent and use that as a mechanism for control. But we're not at a point yet. Most of these platforms are not at a point yet where you can do all of that like over API or over, it's so now what you're also seeing are gateways, like agent-based gateways. And it's evolving to a point where I would make the argument that traditional identity teams need to go back to school, like not necessarily formal class, but this is coming fast, and you can't just apply the dated way of thinking to solving these problems. Those builders and those identity teams need to get together, and they need to figure out what this streamlined process. Best ways to do it that I've seen. Organizations are establishing, AI center of excellence or governance boards or whatever you want to call them, steering committees, and they're working together to define what's going to work for their organization. How do we want to build the guardrails around it? And that's a major step forward. It's a big start. But again, I stand firm that 6 months from now, something new is going to get introduced and disrupt it. And it's a very disruptive time. So the best we can do, right, is continue to stay ahead, continue to influence, and continue to like educate ourselves.
I think that's profound. One of the things you said there, I think, is spot on, right? Identity, I always tell people it's an awesome field to get into, but it's not an awesome field to get into if you want to learn it and then have those learnings last for the next 20 years. Because this is an industry that flips you on your head every 3 to 5 years. And I think this change that's happening with AI is affecting every industry, but it's flipping our industry head over heels. So I think that's just, I wanted to throw that out there. And now I want to throw another hairball at you. Actually, this one should be a lot easier, right? So you keep hearing this idea that identity is the new control plane. And I want to know, does that resonate with you? Is that like a concept that SailPoint puts their arms around?
Yeah, I mean, well, the answer from a SailPoint perspective is absolutely yes, right? But the look, the reasoning behind that, and again, even just neutrally focusing on thinking of identity as a control plane, forget the vendor for a minute. Um, I don't know where else you can apply the control. If you think about the disposition that we live in today, right? So you're not behind the four walls of an organization. You're remote, disparate. That's nothing new. So we build, what do? We have SaaS applications, cloud applications that provide things. We've got things that are on-prem. We have VPNs, we have, whatever, right? Like all the things around it. But if you think about identity as the control plane, identity really stands as the only place that you can build a box around something or someone or some process. It's back to that zero trust model, right? Never trust, always verify, right? And I think while that's been, conceptually difficult for the industry to get totally on board with, the cybersecurity industry to get totally on board with, it's by principle, it's the right thing, but it's incredibly expensive to try to operate that way, with how most organizations want to function. So we have to really think about, like, that identity is that component. It's deciding, or it's what allows me to decide, do I trust you? Do I not? And the attribute context that goes with that is what I'm using to gauge that, or gauge risk, or decide to step up an authentication, or whatever it may be. So yeah, I think I would ask the question. I mean, please educate me if you have a different, point of view. I don't know where else you control it. It has to be identity.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. And I think the real-time nature that identity is shifting to, is identity is the right solution for the time. It's like and if you look at the zero trust model, it ultimately always comes back to the identity controls that are in place at the computer that you're accessing. So, I mean, yeah, to me, I'm right there with you.
Are we entering a phase where all access is considered privileged access, given the proliferation of agentic identities and those identities inferring access maybe from whoever their human, counterpart is? Are we in? Is this a phase that we're entering? Is this a long-term thing? Is this just because we haven't really figured out how to really kind of govern identities for those types of folks yet, or those entities, I should say?
I mean, I think the statement is spot on, right? I think if I were running my own organization, if I were in a CISO's role or a CEO's role, anyone on my network is a threat, right? I don't care if you have no access to anything, zero access, right? Don't have any access to anything. Sorry. I'm from St. Louis. It's allowed. I slip sometimes. I really don't care if you have any access at all, but if you have the ability to join the network, that's step one, right? And I get that there's a lot of security tools in place. There's a lot of things in place to prevent that. But when I think about all access being privileged access, it's, look, I can get to email. There's a lot of sensitive content that comes from email, even if it's internal communications that go out to everybody. How many times have you seen big reduction in force emails that go out, and then all of a sudden they're publicized, and it's bad press, right? There's this idea that, look, just because I've got low level privileges or whatever it may be, there's still vulnerabilities. We're still catching up. Think about any of the vulnerability scanning and remediation that goes on in an environment. We might be hitting all critical and high, like organizations, but they're not getting to all critical, high, medium, low, and there's still risk, right? So the way we look at it is, you really have to think about all access as privileged access. And then we're taking it a step further from a SailPoint perspective. We're looking at just in time, right? How do we fundamentally manage just in time access, and really look at zero standing privilege? So to lean on healthcare again, maybe we get to a day where I'm not on the clock, my access is turned off. I'm on the clock, my access is turned on. I'm in the NICU today, I have specific access for the NICU and not the emergency department or not something else, right? It's one of those things where I think getting and obtaining access has been such a friction-based concept for so long, people are afraid to let it go. Where, I actually think we need to enter a day where it's easier to get access through an approved channel, through a process, through something that allows me to grab that just-in-time credential when I need it, and reduce that friction so that, when I'm not working, my company's not at risk. My access isn't just sitting there for someone to use when I don't know about it.
So we've talked an awful lot about zero standing privilege here in the past, as well as concepts like continuous identity. And I'm a firm believer that you cannot do any of that without really strong automation and orchestration in your identity systems. And, like it or not, a big part of that is your identity governance platform, right? In this case,
Correct.
SailPoint. Can you talk a little bit about how we make this real for people that are out there, whether they have SailPoint or something else? How do we, what's the first steps? Keep that hat on that you were wearing earlier on your answer is, how do I leverage my IGA platform, my SailPoint platform to start to enable the zero standing privilege journey that I really think people should go on to?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, so this is actually a journey that we are embarking on and have already started to release capabilities around. And look, first iterations are exactly what you'd expect. We're gonna do some things that are kind of quick and provide an avenue, but it may not be the best avenue. We're going to iterate and make it better, and that's I think the story of any good software company, right? So one example would be, hey, SailPoint comes with a UI. You can, let's say you already have privileged access. It's assigned to your account, but it's not currently provisioned. It's deprovisioned. So to your point, the automation that has to be in place is we have to be connected to that, and it has to be real time, provision, deprovision, right? That's step one. That app onboarding component, as probably a lot of people listening to this know, is one of the higher friction filled things of being an identity, is trying to discover applications, onboard them, know the context, work with the app teams. Like I think I lost most of my hair from that. It's either that or the three wonderful daughters that I've raised. But at the end of the day, it's a process. And so, we've come forward with technologies to help speed that up, help identify that context. But let's assume we have something connected and that I am approved to have a privileged entitlement, but it's not currently on my account. And by the way, that privileged entitlement, I just want to make sure for the audience, I'm not talking about like an administrative rights to something, right? Maybe that's a secondary account still, right? It could be. We could conceivably no longer need admin accounts if we're only stepping up our personal accounts for that short time frame that it matters, right? So if you imagine I'm just going to log in and edit the books for the end of the close of the quarter as a financial analyst, right? Something like that, right? I don't need that access all quarter long. I need it for the last 3 days or the last day or whatever it is. So if I'm approved to have that access, if I've already had that approval made, it's part of my role, it's all there, but it's not provisioned. I need a mechanism to go, hey, right now I need this role. And I don't want to wait on someone to go click yes and sit in a queue and whatever else. So you do a check and balance. I'm approved to have it. It's sitting on hold, automatically provision, time box it, do the job, get out, right? And that's kind of the idea. Now imagine being a Linux systems administrator or someone in one of the infrastructure roles. Like that's a nightmare. They're like every day they're doing privileged things, right? That's like their whole job. So you have to also think of the other personas and how you start to drive that. And that's where we have to get into more. That's where I think the identity context more on the wire and at the edge really matters, right? How do I know I can trust that you can have this entitlement right now? Well, are you coming over on an approved device? Are you coming through an approved system, approved channel, those types of things? You use that to de-risk and make the decision and automatically provision it, or you step up the request, right? Push an MFA token. You might want to do that every time anyway, and you get that. But I think to your point, Jeff, it's back to automation is key. You have to have that fundamental component in place.
Rob, I'll make a statement here, right? Which is, this is kind of like I think that a lot of people think this, which is that incumbents don't innovate. Listening to you talk, especially about AI, non-humans, and how SailPoint is building solutions. Not only, you can't throw out what the platform is based on, right? But you need to adapt it to all this new. When I look at your counterpart, your buddy Mike Kaiser, he's presenting this week with Ian and Atul on continuous identity at Identiverse. It's not even in SailPoint's wheelhouse, but I think it just kind of shows that you guys have your mind on what's happening in this space. This real-time nature of identity is the only way to adapt and manage kind of what's going on at this level of scale. It can't just be, hey, we're doing an old school accounting of who gets access to what. I mean, it's the scale, the speed at which things are happening. It's dictating it. I think one of the other topics that really made me feel this way when you and I were talking and preparing for the show is we talked about identity posture and kind of this idea of you're more than just that accounting of what entitlements you get and the attributes about you and what the HR system says you are, but it's how you present yourself and whether and how you present yourself might be actually somebody else trying to present as you, and the system's being smart enough to recognize that and take evasive actions, whatever those actions are. But could you talk a little bit about that and how that informs the way you guys are approaching identity?
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, loaded set of things. So to the SailPoint component, and I say this openly, right? I actually welcome competition. I think, and that goes across the board in any software, really in a lot of things in life, but stick to software. It's what makes us better. At the end of the day, if you have one predominant thing and it guides everything, right? There's room for error. Like we want to keep innovating, and that's really the disposition that I think SailPoint's after. Is like we're going to keep innovating. We've been leading in this space for a long time. We've been in the SaaS world for almost 12 years now. It's nothing new. The agentic world is certainly new to a lot of people. We're working on looking at how we see that environment and how we want to go to market with those things. And like I said, just in time access, zero standing privilege are just a couple examples. There's a whole bunch of stuff, on the way. And to your point, we're doing new things that we haven't really traditionally done before. Things around privilege as an example, or understanding more about, what does it actually take to build an agent and deliver that, and what does that, token look like, or whatever it may be. We may not be the owner of it. We may not be in that on the wire, as I was saying at this point, but we do want to understand what's happening in the industry and what's going on, right? And so part of that is then understanding posture management. It's all of that other context it allows us to start to look at things and identify where risk exists, right? We've talked about toxic combinations for years, right? The idea that you shouldn't be accounts payable and accounts receivable. You shouldn't be able to write yourself a check and cash it, right? And so we like those are things that are easy to identify. I say easy. There's still a struggle for a lot of organizations, but we'll still say easy. It's an easy example. But when you start to think about risk posture, think about the individual that like myself, who was at a place for a number of years, all that access that I carried with me and all the different jobs. And it was through the evolution. It was probably 3 HR systems ago, probably, close to 100 different administrators and service desk personnel and whoever else that either provisioned or whatever, all the audits, all the things that go through that. I was a pretty risky posture, if you ask me. Like I was honest with the organization, but I had way more access than I ever should have had. And so it does boil down to some of the basic governance type things, but what the posture management component really is it's really allowing us to say, hey, based on X, Y, and Z, we're elevating the risk, or we're going to push a step up activity, or we're going to do something different, or notify the NOC or SOC and let them know that something's wrong, or give them the ability to take action if they see something wrong. That sort of interoperability or shared signal, if you're familiar with the shared signals framework. And so it's to me, as we start to look down that path and alongside a lot of the other vendors in this space, I truly believe the bottom line is we all have to make each other better. If an organization chooses SailPoint and a number of other things in their identity stack and their security stack, the first question I have is, how can I enhance those other investments? How can I integrate with them, give that capability and enhanced effort that either gives your SOC something, gives your program something, your automation something, or gives me the identity context to better secure posture, right? To think about it differently.
Rob, you've got one of the best backgrounds of any. So for anyone who's not listening or who's listening and not watching the YouTube, go out to YouTube. You got to see Rob's background. He's got an awesome office. I see some guitars, the dark wood, the lighting. I'm very envious. I'm sitting here with my plain vanilla white background, but I didn't see a crystal ball. So you're going to have to answer this with your brain, go the old fashioned route. And what I'm looking for is like some kind of tip or recommendation for the practitioners out there. The next 3 to 5 years, what do they need to concentrate on? What do they need to do to prepare for what's coming?
And I'm going to lean on what I said a little bit ago. Go back to school, right? Again, I don't mean you don't have to go get a degree in this stuff, right? Can if you want, not a bad idea. But at the end of the day, you've got to educate. Get your hands dirty. Don't be afraid. Like I'm not a developer by trade, but let me tell you, AI has made me a developer far more than I ever thought it would. But I've built home lab stuff just to figure things out. Or you can use any one of the main platforms and learn, like, what is an agent? What does it take to build an agent? What do we mean when we say human in the loop or low code, no code, pro code? Like, there's all types of different things out there. And if it's me and I'm betting on this industry, I still stand firm. Technology will create more jobs than it takes, right? But things are going to look different over the next 5-10 years as this evolves.
The data's proving that, by the way. The data is proving that.
You're right. And as this evolves, we have to evolve with it. I love what you said earlier, Jim. Like, identity is not a place to show up and learn something for a few years and then just ride that career for 20 years. That may work if you're, manually provisioning things and you're going to stay in that lane forever. But most organizations are not going to have the time or capital to do that, right? They're going to want to automate. They're going to want to realize those gains. And we're going to put ourselves in positions where we're actually managing agents. We have things doing things for us. It's a different way of thinking. So I can't stress enough. Get your hands dirty, learn some things. There's so much at home. You can automate things at home. I built my own security system in the house. Like, I don't know what I was doing. Home Assistant's an amazing thing, right? So I'm just saying, like, you can do a ton of stuff. Just go get your hands dirty and use the technology to do it. Build some agents. That's my advice.
So, non sequitur, I'm going to ask you about Home Assistant because I'm interested in getting involved with that. Let me ask you a similar question, but I want to be more specific around IGA and the space that SailPoint plays in. What do you see as the future for identity governance and administration, as that sector, as we call it, in 10 years? Is it agentic? Is it still kind of look like how it looks today with, essentially configuration panels and business process? I'll give you my interpretation of where I think it goes, but I'm curious to see what you think as well. And I'll start so you have some time to think about it. But I do see a spot where in the future it is mostly agentic. And the real battle are these small, specialized agentic identities that do very specific tasks that are very, very good at it. And, maybe there's an access review bot. Maybe there is a onboarding bot. Maybe there's a bot that does connectors to, various platforms, right? And that's their entire job, is just making that up. And a solution is essentially a collection of these agents that are mostly autonomous with some loose human oversight that is essentially, enabling all the business process to go behind it. So if I decide I want to send a text message, say, hey, I need this access to, this thing, some agent picks up on that and says, oh, okay, cool. Now what do I do with that based on my rule set? Maybe I send a text message, or maybe it's a Slack, or maybe it's dynamic enough to know, whether it needs approval or doesn't, right? Things like that. And so I kind of see that as like the future. I'm not sure if that's 10 years, 15 years, maybe it's 5, I don't know. But I'm curious, like, specifically, where do you see IGA in 10 years?
Yeah. I actually tend to agree with you. There's a lot of software platforms that are announcing they're going to go headless, right? If you look, what's one of the biggest struggles that we have in identity is user experience and UI. Man, I can remember the days when I first got SailPoint as an IIQ customer, right? The on-prem solution, and it's awesome. But then it's like I need to request access, and all of a sudden I've got 300,000 entitlements to pick from, and and at the end of the day, it's this isn't a platform this is a data issue, right? They're non-human readable entitlements, right? It's garbage. I don't know what the acronym is, and there's no description and whatever, right? So I think what'll happen over the next, we'll call it 10 years. I actually think it'll be quicker than that. Is you're right. There will be agents that do core functions. The way anyone delivers software now is so much different. You can, as long as you get the data model right, you can vibe code a lot of stuff to deliver a user, like as a company, right? So I think what starts to change is we've got to get really good at the data and the data correlation and knowing that it's kind of clean and some of those things that have kind of longstanding been a challenge, but been something that just administrators kind of handle. I think organizations are going to be focused on that level of things, and it's going to be up to technology companies like us, right, that help make that easier. But I think it's going to change the way we interact. Like, do I really need to go to a UI to ask for something? Or can I quite literally go, hey, I just hired somebody. They're going to be working under me. I've got an employee, Sally Jones, whatever. I need things to look similar. And like, it starts to ask me questions, and then we just, we spit out okay, here's the access request. We get that thing approved, whatever it might be. The point is, I think you're going to start to see more and more technology go where people are, and not necessarily ask people to come to it. And that to me is how we start to look at this a little bit differently. From the agent side of things, I still think we're going to be in the world of compliance and governance. If you look at, there's an act that was finally released over in the UK. There's some stuff on the way in the US. Right now, we don't have a lot of governance around much of anything AI, but I would think in the next 3 to 5 years, we'll see more of that legislation. And much like the Air Canada example, it's going to be on the company to own its process, and they're going to want to know that they have control of that process. So while I think the idea of fully autonomous companies, one person running 100,000, like, sure, like that's neat, but I don't think it's a reality for anyone that wants to last a long time.
Yeah, not anytime soon. Just judging based on the speed with which some businesses move. We're still moving to the cloud, right? And the cloud was the future in 2000.
Correct.
You've been super generous with your time, Rob, and I want to ask you some questions about Home Assistant, but I also want to ask you a question around 3D printing, because I know that that's a hobby of yours. And I'm actually, I would say, starting to get into the market for 3D printing. And so I would appreciate some advice. Tell me about your journey into 3D printing. Is there a specific thing that I should be looking for? And then what are some cool stuff that you've done with that?
Man.
And yes, let's try to keep it like maybe 5 minutes.
No, it's fine. I won't drone on. Look, I love it. I don't know how to go back. Like the idea of I need a part, and you just click go and it's done in 2 hours back there in the back room. It's amazing. So I actually made the dumb decision to start with 3D printing with resin, which, if you're not familiar with that, it's a liquid, and you're curing a liquid to a solid using UV light, and it does it layer by layer. And resin is a nightmare when it goes wrong. And let me tell you, when you're starting out, it goes wrong all the time, right? And you're dealing with chemicals, and you're whatever. It's awesome. I don't have it. I wish I had the little figurine in front of me. I'd show you, but I've literally printed action figures. Why? Because I can. And at the end of the day, they look better than what you would buy at a store. It's insane the quality that you can get out of these things. But I do most of my stuff on an FDM printer, and I've stuff was running today to fix some air duct part back there, and then I was telling Jim the other day when we were prepping, I said, yeah, man, I printed every light on my deck posts outside are all 3D printed. I made the light rings. I ran all the wiring harnesses. I built the junction boxes. They're all wired in. And guess what? One fails, it cost me 90 cents to reprint it. So yeah, they're amazing. I
mean, that's a lot of work though, right? To get to that state of how long does it take to to print this stuff?
Well, those took a while because they're big pieces. So, those were more probably close to 18 hours per light times 10 lights. So, but a lot of it is like, file print and then just walk away and it just does the thing. But yeah, it's a journey. Printing is so cool, but at the end of the day, it's a learning exercise. You have to understand the different types of materials, how bed adhesion works, how things get layered up, what needs a support. Like you can't print in a negative space. So if you had a part that like had an overhang, you have to build a support with it so that when it gets to the overhang, it doesn't fail, right? Otherwise you end up with a big stringy mess and it's a nightmare to clean up. So it's much like most things, it's through lots and lots of failure. That's how you learn. 3D printing is something.
Do you have a Mount Everest of something that you would like to print, but you haven't tackled it yet?
You know what? My buddy did this and I'm jealous. So yeah, you can print a life-size Link Master Sword from Zelda. And it's totally free to get the thing. Like literally, they give you the colors of the filament to buy. You can make the whole thing. And I'm like, you know what? That's next on the list. It'll be back there at some point.
That's great. I'm a World of Warcraft fan, so I would probably have like all the weapons behind me at some point. Now I'm thinking, Jim, like maybe we'd get maybe we can figure out how to like do a 3D printer for the podcast, and I print out little action figures of you and I, and maybe that's a way to like use the podcast for that.
And then you'd have a battle axe. Because why not?
I mean, all the things that I do in the editing room, right, when I put together these episodes, imagine if I could translate that into a physical 3D space, man. I mean, I would have so much fun with that.
Hey, I've got a 3D scanner too. You can scan your hand and print the exact model. Like it's crazy what you can do.
Wait, so how does that work? A 3D scanner? Is it your phone or like an actual device?
No, it's a device, and it's a couple different ways. So the common way is using blue light, and you basically have to kind of freeze yourself or like an object in place, and you go around it 360, and it picks up everything, and then using the software, it'll kind of pull it together, like wherever maybe it drifted, and then you have to clean it up a little bit and print. Like it's again, it's amazing what you can do. So.
What a world we live in. That's the replicator from Star Trek come to life.
I mean, and the last thing I'll say about it, I was reading an article a while back, but like think about all the things you buy on Amazon, right? And so you buy it, 2-day shipping's awesome, it shows up, but a lot of it is just plastic, right? So now imagine that instead it's shipping right to your printer. The printer's going off and printing the thing, and like in an hour, that thing is ready, right? Depending upon what it is that you need. And so I think that's sort of one of those neat, future models that may not be so far off, that if you had the raw material, you're actually buying the assembly instructions over buying the product. And think about how much that cuts on carbon emissions and all the other things that go along with it, right? But although the other side of, we're also wasting a lot of plastic. So I'm not the guy to solve the environmental problems, but it is neat to think about, a different way of delivery.
It's a very cool thing. I'm gonna have to pick your brain a little bit, maybe after we hit record here. But there's 3D printing has scaled up quite a bit. Like I've read articles of houses being 3D printed using concrete or concrete-like type material, things like that. And one of my favorite book series, which is We Are Legion, or the Bobaverse, for people who know that I've talked about this book before, is they have this concept of auto factories that these AIs build. And the factories are essentially 3D printers in space that print whatever you want based on the raw materials in the solar system. And so they're creating spaceships and, all kinds of things. And it's, I don't think we are too far off. It's obviously, scale and cost are big things, but it's a very cool idea to think about, what if I could just turn around behind me and say, oh, my microphone broke, right? Or this adapter, this 3/4 to 1/4 screw isn't, threaded correctly. I'll just print something behind me and it'll be ready in a couple minutes. I mean, that's amazing.
It is. Yeah. The house printing thing is the dream. That would I read about a guy that he bought one of those printers. Like he spent $250,000 to buy a concrete printer, but he built $1 million home with it. So it's amazing the technology that's there to do it. It's a cool video online. Anyway, it blows my mind every day. It's like living in the future. That is exactly what we are doing.
All right, so Rob's going to create the sword from Zelda. I'm going to create probably a bunch of Warcraft weapons and action figures for IDAC. Jim, what are you going to print with a 3D printer?
Probably something with baseball. Babe Ruth's baseball bat.
A replica.
Yeah, why
You can
not?
just print Babe Ruth, man.
See, there you go. You're not thinking big enough. Rob's got the ideas. He's the strategist, right? He's telling you, think
That's
bigger.
right. Think bigger. I
Well,
love
Rob,
the whole idea of like 3D printing, though, man. It's exactly living in the future.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask you after we're done talking here, Rob, about maybe some ideas for my first printer. And if people are listening or watching, drop me a note on LinkedIn. What you think I should get for a first printer. Something easy, something for me to dip my toe in, right? That kind of thing. But we'll go ahead and wrap it up there for this week. Rob, thank you so much for being on the show. We'll have links in our show notes for people to reach out to if they've got questions. Obviously, people want to go out and support SailPoint for supporting us, sailpoint.com. We'll have that link in our show notes as well. Rob, let me ask you one last question. If there's one thing that people should know about SailPoint, before we wrap up, that maybe people don't know, what is something you would tell them?
I mean, look, I think the way what I would reply with is we're always innovating. This is not a static world that we live in from a technology perspective. And we're very interested in hearing feedback and what's working, what's not. Where do you see new challenges? What does a new technology or this disruptive technology mean to you? It's a constant education loop for us. We spend a massive amount in R&D every year, and that's because we're so dedicated to bringing more to the market, and really focusing again on identity as that control plane. So, I thank you guys so much for the time. This has been awesome. Look forward to maybe doing this again.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. And hopefully seeing you here at a conference, whether it's Identiverse, I'm not sure if you'll be there or not, or somewhere around. Obviously, we're recording this a couple days before it, but really appreciate the time. Again, sailpoint.com. We'll have links in our show notes. Connect with Rob, maybe drop feedback there. Drop feedback for us, for the podcast itself, idacpodcast.com. Like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. Helps us get great guests like Rob, which is very easy for me to say. And we'll go ahead and wrap it up there for this week. Thanks everyone for watching and or listening, and we'll talk with y'all in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.